Welcome in, everybody, to the Full-Time Fantasy podcast powered by Full-Time Fantasy and the FFWC. I am your host, Billy Muzio, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Jody Smith. Jody, how you doing tonight, buddy?
Doing okay. It's been a challenging week, and it feels kind of, irregular to just go back to something like fantasy football. But duty calls. We have to, I guess, move forward, and that what I'm talking about. I think maybe that's a topic for a different time. But I'm ready to surge forward and talk about our running back fades and.
You got running back fades, running back sleepers tonight. If you guys have not done so already, I just tweeted it out on Twitter. I'll load it into the show here as we're going. But we're going to be giving away a Javonte Williams card. So make sure you're listening throughout the show. One of the things we're going to be talking about is the FFWC and May Madness. And with May Madness, you still get discounted teams at FFWC through the end of May. It's the biggest discounts that you can get. So make sure to head on over before the end of the month. Reserve your teams. You only have to pay the deposit. And then from there, you can secure the deepest discounts of the year prior to drafting season. Stick around, folks. We're going to do the intro. We're going to get back and talk about running back sleepers and fades. See you soon.
Nothing but time, use it to grind. They huff and they puff it, this bacon is mine. Stakes are all high, your stakes are so dry. I'm as rare as they come, put it all on the line. Losing very doubtful, cause I'm winning every outcome. I'm impressed by his guess, there's no reason to guess. Drafting like I won the lotto, but it's grind every day. Managing teams is just part of the game. Free agents, lineups, they all in one place. This is the content that can't be replaced. Speaking of place, first is the option. Win is the goal and I do it real often. Tournament entries, I already bought them. I bury the field, that's the nail in the coffin. Checking my watch, checking my clock. Grind is the time, I ain't never gonna stop. Digital, analog, never gonna stop. You ain't never gonna stop, I ain't never gonna stop. Checking my watch, checking my clock. Grind is the time, I ain't never gonna stop. Digital, analog, never gonna stop. You ain't never gonna stop, I ain't never gonna stop. Cause it's grind time, let's go.
Did the grind time intro on accident there, but it's okay. It's still the same. We're grinding.
All right, I love listening to it. So all right with me.
I was like, man, that's my other show, but okay, it works. It works. We're grinding out some running back sleepers and fades tonight.
There you go.
So question right off the bat, and I think this is actually something I wanted to talk about as we kind of jump into the show tonight. And I was wondering what constitutes a sleeper. I just want to say, for me, a sleeper is somebody who's going to be going in rounds 12, 13, 14 plus. Like, we're not talking about people who are going in the top 10 rounds. And honestly, like, when I look at a sleeper, everyone says sleeper these days, right? I'm looking at, these are more like league winners, right? These are people who are going so late in drafts. You're talking rounds 18, 19, 20, if not, late teens at the very earliest. These are the type of players that we're drafting, we're getting a discount on, and we're making sure that we're able to really catapult our lineups into championship teams. And in tournaments, that's what you need to hit on. You have to hit on these sleeper picks in order to separate yourself from the pack and have a real shot at the money up top. If we don't hit on these sleepers, like, your teams are just going to be the vanilla teams, right? Where you're drafting your running backs early and you're hoping to hit on your top tier running backs. But if you're able to hit on some of these late guys, these sleepers that we say, late round draft picks, that's to me what constitutes a sleeper. What do you say about that, Jody?
Well, you can go to 5 different sites and have 5 different listings and ideas of what the term sleeper is. So yeah, it's a very vague term that's open to interpretation. I've always viewed sleeper as a player that vastly outperforms their draft position. And by vastly, in my ideas, you're getting a guy that's 4, 5, 6 rounds of production better than where you got him from. So I kind of agree with you that I feel like sleepers are guys that should be on the back half of drafts. But it's funny, like I said, you may go to an article that has a guy in round 3 or 4 ADP, but the author may be saying that this guy's got top 5 potential. So in their mind, they're a sleeper. like I said, I mean, it's something that's open to interpretation. I personally lean more towards what you said. It's guys in maybe the mid, but definitely the late round that have the chance, either through unexpected opportunity or through injury, whatever, that have the chance to be extreme, real difference makers, which is, in our case today, an RB2 or better that you get in round 9 or 13. A guy that comes out of nowhere and wins a starting job and becomes an every week starter. To me, that's a sleeper. Doesn't happen, every year, but it's guys that we, as analysts, we try to find later and suggest the upside or the potential in guys.
Great. We have two good, I think, definitions there, or at least our opinion on what constitutes a sleeper. Now that we have the podcast is filling up, I'm going to repeat what I said before the show started. We are giving away a Javonte Williams card here tonight.
An autographed card.
Autographed card. So how do you win the autographed card? Okay, head on over to my Twitter at FFMusio. I retweeted something, or you can even just go to the original tweet that I talked about the show, retweet that the show is tonight on there, and to jump on in and listen, just retweet that original post. And then we are going to be talking about May Madness at the FFWC. And later on, I'm going to be asking a question in regards to May Madness at the FFWC. And if you get the question right, then we will be giving away this Javonte Williams autographed card. So real quick, May Madness, for those who don't know, at the FFWC is the deepest discount of the year on drafts if you reserve your draft spots. So all you need to reserve a World Championship team is $200 to reserve your team. And there is discounted prices from your first team through your 10th team and all the way down. So reserve your teams. Deepest discount now, all the way through the end of May, May 31st, the last date. And I'm going to be asking questions at the end about May Madness, and whoever answers the question correctly wins the Javonte Williams card. So tune in. We'll give those instructions again as we keep going in between our fades and our sleepers. So make sure that you stay tuned, and at the end, we'll ask that question. Okay, without further ado, let's start with our sleepers. I think we're already on the topic of sleepers. We already talked about the definition, at least in our definition of sleepers. Why don't you walk me through your first one, Jody?
Well, going by what I just said from sleepers, we're actually just looking at guys that we are either fading or kind of trying to target in drafts here. So by my definition of sleeper, I didn't dig deep. I wanted to find guys that are, in those middle rounds that I think have real potential, or in my opinion, are representing a lot of value right now. First running back off the board for me is a guy that I've pretty much been able to get almost everywhere. A.J. Dillon with Green Bay. So I can't figure out why. He's not badly undervalued, but he's typically somewhere going after RB25. He's typically around RB30. Last time I looked at the FFWC ADP, he was at 68, which was running back 26. And to me, with Dillon, he was the RB21 last year in PPR leagues, and I'm seeing great potential for him to have a huge uptake in touches overall here and have more value on this Green Bay team that lost Devontae Adams, that lost Marquez Valdez-Scantling. The way I see things is his role is going to improve. But let's get back to what Dillon is. Looking at the analytics last year, he was Pro Football Focus's number 3 graded running back last year. That's pretty fantastic. Now, like I said, put up 805 rushing yards and 5 touchdowns last year. But what was surprising about him is he caught 34 of 37 targets. That's actually pretty good. He wasn't known as much of a pass catching guy, but he showed those receiving chops last year. He was actually 6th on the team in targets. Now it's a usage that I'm liking for Dillon. Last year when he got double-digit touches in 9 of Green Bay's final 10 games, he became an every week RB2, RB3 last year down the stretch, and that's the usage I kind of envision the Packers using going forward. I'm thinking right now, as good as Aaron Jones is as a receiving back, my expectations are, and Jones was 2nd on Green Bay in targets last year, by the way. I see that kind of continuing. I see Jones spending a lot more time lined up in a perimeter as a receiver. Definitely, he's a great in the red zone. So My expectations are that Dillon is going to take on more of the in between the tackles rushing ability, getting all those opportunities inside, and he was pretty effective in short yardage last year. So I see Dillon as, a guy who can approach 1,000 rushing yards. Last year, RB21, like I said, I think the opportunities are going up. So I envision A.J. Dillon as a top 20 running back, and he's somebody, like I said, that it's not unusual to see at all him fall outside the top 30. So he's the guy I'm trying to scoop up as much as I can.
Yeah, he had a pretty productive set of games. I mean, you look at week 5, he was running back 19 week 5, but you look at some of his higher scoring games, and week 10, he was running back 3 that week. Week 12, running back 9. Week 17, running back 7. So the upside is there, and I think you hit the hammer on the nail. He's one of the running backs that I am a lot higher on than consensus this year. I was not on him last year, just didn't think his time was quite ready. I think he developed more than I expected him to develop. And we saw that towards the tail end of the season. We saw that in his role as he continued to grow and kind of develop into that role. And I think you hit the hammer on the nail with kind of the necessity of the passing game this year as well. There's a lot of vacated targets. There's a lot of new faces in this offense, and I think that he's going to be needing Rodgers going to be needing a familiar face. And plus, we got to mention Dillon started taking over a lot of that short yardage as well, right? And he started, getting a lot of goal line touches. So there's a lot to like with A.J. Dillon. I dug a little deeper in here with my definition, at least, of sleepers, and wanted to choose Marlon Mack. And for me, like, Marlon Mack is hashtag good at football, and people have forgotten just how good he is. I mean, I understand he tore his Achilles in September of 2020. He's 2 years removed now, and it seems to be he's ready to make a splash in Houston with a larger role. But prior to that injury, Marlon Mack was productive. And just how productive, people may ask. 2018, Mack finished as running back 21 in PPR leagues. He is averaging 14.8 fantasy points per game. He finished the year with 195 attempts, 908 rushing yards, 9 touchdowns, 17 receptions for another 103 receiving yards. So he does have some ability in the passing game. Not a lot, but it's there, right? Also had another score in the air. He was running back 23 in juke rate, running back 18 in the league in evaded tackles, running back 15 in yards created, running back 22 in breakaway rate, and then running back 16 in rushing yards on the season. Fast forward to 2019, Mack finished as running back 22, so just one spot lower than 2018. And he averaged 13 fantasy points per game, 247 attempts, so he's able to handle a larger role, 1,091 rushing yards, 8 scores, another 14 receptions and 82 yards in the air. And he took some steps forward in the metrics. So running back 11 in juke rate, running back 15 in evaded tackles, running back 10 in yards created, running back 5 in yards created per attempt, running back 10 in breakaway rate at 5.3%, and then running back number 3 in total breakaway runs. And for those who are unfamiliar with that statistic, that is a run of 15 yards or more. It's something that I look at and say, how explosive is this player? That's a lot of breakaway runs. So number 3 in the league in breakaway runs. So I'm going to tell people right now, stop sleeping on Marlon Mack. He's finally starting to climb up boards. I mean, I've seen him go as late as round 19 in the last week, but he's usually around that round 15, 16 range, maybe sometime the 14th if someone knows, about him and they're drafting him. But keep your eyes peeled for Marlon Mack in early drafts.
Yeah, and the thing about Mack is, like you just mentioned, sometimes he's available in round 19. He's basically free money. And the thing is, so we talked a little bit, I think, last week when we talked about Houston's offensive line, how I believe they were 23rd or somewhere around that range in run blocking. You just invested the number 16 pick and a guard. They should be better. I expect Houston's offensive line to actually move up more towards the average category. We talked a little bit about why their sack numbers were so bad with Deshaun Watson and whatnot, and the thing is, there's not much in front of Marlon Mack. Rex Burkhead, okay, he's a nice little fun guy, but he's not someone who should be the kind of guy that's going to get 150 touches a year for a team. He's the kind of guy who, he should be coming in as the third running back. And of course, Damien Pierce is still a relative unknown. I understand they invested the pick in him, but I really expect they'll at least open the season in the committee. But like you hit on some great points. 19 touchdowns in his first 2 seasons. Guy's got a good feel for the end zone. And hey, you know what? He's being drafted so late. There's almost nothing but upside with Mack.
Scott says he smelled Billy stashing cash. Might up being comeback candidate by September. Jody nailed last year's comeback with James Conner. Good call on Conner last year.
Oh, boy.
Scott has a question here. He traded for A.J. Dillon by giving away a 2023 first and Jalen Tolbert. How did he do? I'm going to ask, where do you expect that first to be? If it's the latter part of like, 9, 10, 11, 12, okay, but I think it's a little steep.
It seems a bit steep, but if you're all in to win, if you got a team that was stacked and you just needed an RB2 or an RB3, that's cool. Because like Billy just said, if you're expecting to have the 11th or the 12th pick, Jalen Tolbert, I like him overall, but still, basically an unknown. The thing is, 2023 looking like a really good rookie draft. So hard to give away something like that because in dynasty leagues, as you know, people do not want to give up draft picks. But, it could work out great for you. Like I said, if A.J. Dillon ends up being a top 20 running back, I'm sure you won't regret that you did that, especially, if it comes through for you and you win, then certainly it would have been worth it.
Well said. Well said. All right. Walk me through your second sleeper or value pick at the running back position.
Okay, I'm looking at another guy who I think maybe people are just forgetting how good Devin Singletary was, down the stretch last season. He scored 14.9 or more PPR points in Buffalo's final 7 games. And that coincided with him becoming the club starter when he started getting double-digit carries, which was 9 of Buffalo's final 10 games. Look, I understand that they just invested a second-round pick in James Cook, so people are maybe a little low on Singletary, not expecting that to carry over. His FFWC PPR is 77, and that is RB30. Well, when I see that, it just reeks of value. Listen, James Cook, 5'11", 190. General Manager Brandon Beane already said this week that he envisions Cook, at least initially, just being a sub back. So you're talking about, maybe a pass catcher, which, that's an area that Singletary's actually been pretty good. But it doesn't sound like, at least off the bat, that James Cook's going to really have a large role for the club. And, of course, if Singletary can carry over anywhere near the momentum he had, Cook's not even going to get an opportunity to do much. Zack Moss, the other guy on the roster, I don't know that he'll even make the opening day roster. They also signed, Duke Johnson. Again, you're talking about, just a journeyman. But let's look at, I looked at some of the metrics of what Zack Moss did, looking at Pro Football Focus. And overall, he was there, or RB11, pretty impressive. He had more yards after contact per attempt than Joe Mixon, Austin Eckler, Christian McCaffrey, Josh Jacobs, Najee Harris. Singletary, he's a creator. He forced 51 missed tackles. That ranked 7th in football. And again, he didn't even have much of a role until the second half of the season. He was basically just splitting all those touches with Moss. He ranked 4th in designed runs of 15 plus yards. That was 31. He had a 31% breakaway rate. You just mentioned that's carries of 15 plus yards. That was 7th among all running backs. He also caught 40 of 50 targets. So I'm looking ahead at, Buffalo, clearly one of the favorites to win the Super Bowl this year. I looked at Full-Time Fantasy strength of schedule tool, which was just updated per Scott. The Bills have the league's number 3 schedule for running back this year. I'm all in on Devin Singletary. If he's going to stay this low as RB30, this is a guy you're able to get in the 7th round. He's got RB2 potential easily. If he can even come anywhere near even 2/3 to 3/4 of the momentum that he carried into the second half last year, the guy's going to be money, and that allows you to load up on safer wide receivers and you maybe even take a shot on one of the elite tight ends early in your draft. If you can get a guy like Singletary later on, round 6, round 7, straight money.
I love the Singletary mention. It's funny because prior to the draft, I wasn't drafting a lot of Singletary. I thought they were going to add, possibly Breece Hall, because there was some scuttle saying that they may take him round one, right? There was a lot of I should say hesitance on my side to add him real early in drafts. And then after the draft and they took Cook, he actually fell. And in my mind, to me, like, I wasn't as scared of Cook as I was of somebody like Breece Hall or even Walker, to where I thought it was going to, eat into his immediate role as a 1-2 back, right? Where I don't think Cook's ever going to be able to handle a full workload in the NFL. So for me, it kind of cemented the role of Singletary and what he did down the stretch. I mean, down the stretch, weeks 13 through 17, Singletary was running back 6 in PPR leagues. Running back 6. He actually outscored Jonathan Taylor down the stretch. He outscored Joe Mixon down the stretch. He outscored Austin Eckler, Aaron Jones. I mean, all down the stretch. I mean, this is running back 6 on those weeks. 105 attempts, 411 yards, and 5 touchdowns on the ground during that stretch, with 14 receptions, 110 yards, and 1 score.
I think he found the end zone, like 6-7 straight games to end the season. I mean, I don't have his numbers in front of me more, but again, you're bringing up a good point. It's right now, it's early in the season still. So we have the dynasty obsessive people in there. And I like James Cook as a prospect just fine. But I think he's going to at least open his career probably as, just like their GM said, as a sub back, as a, just a piece on a committee. Maybe it turns into more. I don't know. He's a little undersized. So we'll see how it plays out. But I think it's just it's the dynasty community that really loves James Cook as a prospect. Maybe they're targeting him and staying away from Singletary. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm willing to take advantage of that at least now. And I expect Singletary move up at least 5 or 6 spots by the time everything's said and done this summer.
Great. Love the Singletary pick. Again, I'm going to go a little deeper here, and my next sleeper pick is going to be Damien Williams. This is one of my favorite late round addition in drafts, and he might be one of my most owned running backs through the first half of drafting season, because yes, I have been drafting since the week before the Super Bowl. So that being said, he is free in drafts. I mean, if you're ever in need of a running back, you can grab him literally in rounds 19 or 20 and just hold him and see how camp unfolds. Best ball, a little more risk, but redraft, you can fix your roster. If he ends up, being second or third fiddle, you can cut him and grab somebody else off the waiver wire. But recent reports are starting to show that Cordell Patterson is going to be playing out wide a little bit more, and we're going to see, more of a traditional backfield here role from the rookie Algier, from Damien Williams, or whoever else they want to throw in the mix, right? 2022, they just signed him to a 1-year, $1.6 million contract. So if they did cut him, it's going to cost him a little bit, but I'm not too concerned with him being cut based upon the rest of the backs on this field. And you look at his previous stats, again, he didn't play in 2020 because of COVID, but 2019, and I don't count 2021 because he's on the Bears and it's Matt Nagy, so we'll just chop that up as a Nagy loss. But 2019 in Kansas City, he finished as the season as running back 38, so, BFD, but in a limited role, that was. But if you look at kind of his metrics, this is where I get kind of more intrigued. Running back 23 in juke rate, running back 33 in evaded tackles, running back 13 in yards created per attempt, running back 18 in yards created per game. I mean, you look at the Super Bowl, and he was robbed of the Super Bowl MVP that year when he played my Niners. He rushed that game for 17 times, 104 yards with 38-yard touchdown. And he caught 4 passes for 29 yards with another touchdown. He should have been MVP of the Super Bowl that year. Lastly, Atlanta has the 5th most vacated carries. I've talked about vacated targets a lot. I have not released this form yet, but they have the fifth most vacated carries of all the backfields in the NFL. 191 carries are up for grabs in this backfield. That's 52.3% or run share of their team from prior years. And even if he is splitting this time with Tyler Algier, or they added McNichols today, there's plenty of opportunities for him to succeed in this backfield, especially taking him in round 20.
I found myself, Billy, doing the same thing because I don't know what to make of this Atlanta team, but we saw Cordell Patterson kind of fade a little bit down the stretch last year. And you're absolutely right. Look, they did almost nothing to upgrade a receiving core that was, gosh, I mean, easily must have been, if not the worst, the second worst receiving core in football, maybe the Bears, depending on your perspective. But it makes sense that's where Patterson was more effective. It makes more sense for them to switch him back to that role. Maybe he takes on like a little bit more of a Deebo Samuel type role where he obviously will get some carries and whatnot. But, again, we keep hitting on short yardage, and we're going to keep hitting on short yardage. I think Damien Williams is actually really effective in that area too. So, it remains to be seen how it plays out. But the key point from what you said about Williams is he's basically free. Round 19, round 20, he probably goes undrafted in a ton of drafts. I mean, there's almost nothing but upside with that point. If he doesn't play out, he doesn't make the roster, which I expect he will. But you said, hey, what if he doesn't make the roster? Well, you know what? It was your 17th or your 16th, your 18th round pick. There's guys that you probably picked above that are going to get cut. So, there's almost nothing but positive to take a chance on him.
Exactly, especially in redraft and tournaments. Like, it's a no-brainer to me. All right, we're going to be moving along to our fades here at running back. But before we do so, we're going to touch base on FFWC again in May Madness. Again, you have till the end of May 31st to
5 days.
5 days to secure those teams. So head on over to FFWC, drop your deposit in. Like I said, for the World Championship, it's only a $200 deposit to register your teams. Deepest discount of the year through the end of May, and then those prices change as we get into June. So earlier the better, the early bird discount here. And then we will be giving away this Javonte Williams card at the end of the show. I'm going to be asking about May Madness. I'm going to ask about one statistic here, and all you have to do inside the chat is repeat that statistic inside the chat. The first person to do so will win the card, but also make sure you retweeted the show was live today on the FF Museo on my Twitter account. Just find that tweet, retweet it, either today's or yesterday's, whatever you do, and we'll make sure that makes you eligible as well to win the card. So stick around. We got our fades, and then we'll be giving away this card shortly. Jody, who's your first fade?
Well, it's funny. You were just talking about Marlon Mack, who is trying to come back from an Achilles injury, which is, while we're kind of on a topic, Cam Akers. So what he did last year to come back to recover from a ruptured Achilles in 6 months, amazing. I mean, what a great feel-good story. There's almost no track record for running backs bouncing back that effectively other than Deontay Foreman, who actually seems like he's in many ways actually better. But ruptured Achilles, those ended careers for guys like Arian Foster, Beanie Wells, Lindell White, Isaiah Crowell. These were all guys that had that injury in their primes and were just basically done after that. But that said, it's amazing that Akers was able to recover so quickly from such a devastating injury. But there's some troubling developments last year, and I don't know if it had to do with maybe he was hesitant or maybe he just wasn't 100%. I don't know. But when you look at how he did as a rookie, he averaged 4.3 yards per carry. It's a solid number as a rookie. You look at Pro Football Focus number. He was their RB 28 in 2020. He had a 25.9% breakaway run rate, and he averaged 2.96 yards after contact per attempt. And he was their 64th in Pro Football Focus exclusive elusive rating. Okay, when you look at last year, I understand it was a very small sample size, but he was dead last among Pro Football Focus and breakaway rates for running backs that had at least 20% of their carries. He went from 2.96 yards after contact per attempt down to 2.31, and his elusive rating dipped from 46.3 to 33.3. He went from 64th down to 95th. And this was with, another concern for me is the Rams' offensive line was 25th last year in run blocking, and now you just lost Andrew Whitworth, who was 30th at tackle. He's being replaced by Joseph Notebloom, who's actually moving over, but he was their 52nd, so I don't know that they're going to be, even less effective in that area. And another concern for me, and I've tweeted this before, is I don't know that Sean McVay just doesn't trust Cam Akers in the red zone. We keep hitting on red zone, but those are like targets for what targets mean to wide receivers. Red zone carries can mean to running backs. They're the most valuable carries. In 2020, Cam Akers in 13 games was second on the team with 31 red zone rushing attempts, but he was last among their 3 running backs in yards per carry and only had 2 touchdowns and 2 targets in that area. He was like an afterthought as a receiver. Last year, including the playoffs in 5 games, he had 13 red zone carries and averaged just 2.1 yards per carry and only had 1 target. He was outplayed in that entire area by Darrell Henderson and Sony Michel. I get that Sony Michel's gone. Another concern for me is that the Rams, McVay and the Rams traded up to get Kyren Williams. He's a 3-down back. He's very capable of coming in, being effective in short yards, being effective as a receiver. I like Cam Akers. Like I said, he's a feel-good story for me. But his FFWC, his ADP is 28 as RB14. I have some serious concerns. Again, if for no other reason, if they continue with the usage that they did for him in the postseason, which was really, really impressive, despite the fact that he averaged 0.6 yards per carry, something like that. It was bad. It was less than 2 yards. It was less than 2. I don't remember what it was, but without the gimme touchdowns, if they're not going to trust him in the short yardage and all that, you're talking about a guy who at best is going to break off 5, maybe 6 scores. They don't seem to really trust him that much in the receiving game either. I don't know, man. I just have some concerns about Cam Akers. And, like I said, it's a great that he came back and he sets the template. Maybe your boy Marlon Mack can also come back from a devastating injury. I just don't see the value in gambling on Akers, like I said, at RB14. I don't see him finishing even there, much less higher than that. So he's a guy that I've just been fading pretty much everywhere.
I was not a Cam Akers fan last year. Most people know that already. Debated Josh Larkey on Cam Akers. We never got to see the result because of the injury. I do have to say the kid had heart coming back as fast as he can. I consistently called him Wolverine. Like, nobody heals that fast, right? It's just amazing. That being said, this is usually a 2-year injury timeline. Marlon Mack is now at 2 years. Foreman was at 2 years, right? You start seeing their careers, or at least their burst, come back a little bit after the 2 years. So I also have a lot of doubts with Cam Akers. Again, if he falls far enough in drafts, I'm taking him, but I'm not comfortable taking him where he's going in drafts.
That's the thing. When we're suggesting, at least with these guys, that we're fading them, what we mean is we're fading them at their current ADP.
Correct.
If Cam Akers is in, the back half of round 4 or round 5, at this point it becomes like, okay, this is value. This is value now. But at his current ADP, which is 28, which is the top half of round 3, no.
Yeah, there's, so you mentioned the red zone, and I think a lot of this has to do with some of the fumbling concerns that Cam Akers has, right? He fumbled twice against the Buccaneers, right? Prior to that, not a lot of fumble issues, but it seemed maybe to just be a trust issue with his body coming off the injury, right? Overthinking his injury, overthinking the hurdles he has to develop, right? It's also just was a stout defense as well, but you look at that and say, how much will he trust him moving forward after those fumbles? Because that's the fastest way to get off the field as a running back, because you put that ball on the ground. And so you really have to protect the ball. I think if that continues in 2022, I would not be surprised to see him ride the pine, at least for, some discipline. But I do have a lot of concerns with Cam Akers at current ADP. So a lot of these I've talked about inside of my article for my fade list. So if you have not seen that, head on over to fulltimefantasy.com. I listed part 1 of my fade list. I'm going to be going through 2 of those running backs that are on that fade list again here shortly. So if you've already read it, you're probably going to hear a lot of the same information, but I'd be more than happy to answer questions while you're here live so I can give you more in-depth reasonings or analysis of why I'm fading these players. And again, what Jody said, this is at price, right? And if there is a deep enough discount on these players, I will draft them in drafts, but at price, my first fade is Derrick Henry. The big dog himself, and I've never been fond of him, quite frankly. Maybe I'm a little biased here, but last year I was wrong with until he hit that Jones fracture, but he seemed to recover pretty quickly from it into playoffs as he came back on the field. But he's at that point in his career. He's 28 years old plus, right? He's had 1,400 carries. It's starting to take a toll on his body. We're starting to see it look like it's beating him down. And this is why I faded him last year. This is why I'm fading him again this year. When you take on that many carries, and yes, he's a big man, he runs people over, but when you are getting hit that often and that much in the NFL, it's going to take a toll on your body. And we look at this Titans offense as a whole, and they traded away A.J. Brown to Philadelphia. The rest of the wide receiver core left in free agency. There's 336 vacated targets on this team. We all know Derrick Henry is not the best pass catcher. So what does that tell me? They're probably going to get Hilliard more involved. That now they have to be concerned with Henry's workload. They already saw his foot injury last year. They don't want to have a repeat of that, because if they do, this offense is they're just going to load the box up. They're not going to be, and they're already probably going to see that as well. So that's something I talked about next. It's like he faced the third most stacked boxes last year. 24.7% of the time was stacked box. And that was with A.J. Brown on the field on some of those games. So you look at what's probably going to happen. I would not be surprised to see him in a stacked box 28, 29% of the time, if not more, because of the weapons that they have, the lack of weapons, I should say, on this offense. So again, I'm fading the big dog. I'm not doing it. I'm not drafting Derrick Henry, and I probably won't own much of him at all.
Yeah, again, and at 28, I mean, I know it sounds relatively young, at least for most of us maybe watching this program here, but that's an age where, for every Curtis Martin that's out there, a guy that just seemed to be getting better, and as he aged very gracefully, there's 9 or 10 Larry Johnsons. These are guys that took on a huge workload and before you know it, we're gone. I don't know that Derrick Henry is going to fade away that quickly, but yeah, there's plenty of red flags with him. And, with most of us being in PPR leagues, I understand, he was on pace to actually be quite productive in that area last year, but it doesn't mean that it's going to be part of what they do moving forward. And, he's still got a first round price tag, and there's just so many running backs in that area that are, more, it's like, Billy, maybe you see a lot of drafts, you get a choice between Derrick Henry and DeAndre Swift. Which way are you going? I mean, it's like,
you can own them both in drafts if that's what you want to do, right? Swift's usually like beginning to the middle of the second round. He slips down sometimes middle second round. So you can own both of them. And I wouldn't suggest taking Swift in the first, because you can own him in the second. But
right.
I mean, honestly, like, I'm taking Eckler ahead of Henry. I'm taking Mixon ahead of Henry. Yeah. I'm taking Najee ahead of Henry. Most of these are,
well, these are guys that are guaranteed to haul in 50 plus passes. These are guys that, as long as they stay healthy, are gonna get 60, 70 plus targets. Derrick Henry, you can't say that about him.
Correct. And that's one of the reasons here. Another reason, I mean, I almost threw Hilliard on this list for my sleeper picks, was because he's not being talked about. There's really, they drafted Haskins, but outside of Henry, there's not a lot of running backs on this roster. And you look, we just talked about the vacated targets and the opportunity, and there's a lot of passes to go around, and there's not a lot of faces. So maybe Henry steps into that role a bit more, but I don't see it happening when Hilliard was successful in that role last year. So I would continue to, project that role kind of goes to Hilliard, which you may see him more on the field just in general in 2022, which is another reason why I'm fading him. Question here from Scott: is it possible that Henry is just a different dude? What do you think? Is Henry just an animal and he's a beast, and he's going to say, you know what, F you, Billy, I'm gonna run until I'm 44 like Tom Brady, and I'm just going to take on 28,000 carries? Like, is he built that different to where he's going to be the exception to the rule of age and carries in the NFL?
It remains to be seen, but when you got to worry about a guy that's that big taking all that punishment and all that. So, I mean, sure, I suppose it's possible, but I'm going to lean more towards no, that he's probably not going to be, any outstanding exception to any rule.
He's got a pretty nasty stiff arm.
He does, and he's a guy that's really, really fun to watch. But again, with targets being so valuable to running backs, to wideouts, to everyone at this point, target equals opportunity. It's an area that Henry is severely lacking versus those other top, the running backs you're going to get in the top 15 overall of a draft. And I would rather take a chance on, if not DeAndre Swift, those other guys that you mentioned, Eckler, whatnot, the guys that are assured of playing that role in the passing game, where Henry, he isn't necessarily.
Okay, so where do you think? So the question from Scott: say he slips the second round, whereabouts do you take him? Where are you comfortable drafting Derrick Henry?
The second round sounds fine. So when we talked about our rankings, I think we both kind of agreed that he was behind. It just became an issue of the top 3 or 4 guys. And then I think we were debating Dalvin Cook versus Henry, and I feel like I would rather draft Dalvin Cook. So at this point, to me, the highest I would consider Henry is maybe my RB6 or RB7. So you're talking, generally you're going to see the first 4 off the board are going to be running backs, and then there's going to be a wide receiver run. So it just depends on, how a draft falls or whatnot. I don't have a problem. I'm down towards the late part of the first round, so I'm going to flip around and be the early part of the second. I mean, I think he starts representing a value when he slides into round 2. Anywhere into round 2, you start thinking, okay, I'm gonna have to start seriously thinking about this. In particular, if you're a guy that decides, you know what, I don't want to take a chance on these running backs. I'm going to draft a receiver here in the mid to the bottom part of round 1, and then you come back around and on the snake draft, and Derrick Henry's on a board. It can be pretty appealing. I can definitely see going that route.
So I haven't counted them, but I know it's well over 100. I'm going to just say 125, just throw a number out there. It's probably more, but I've done about 125 drafts, primarily best ball so far since January. I own 3 shares of Derrick Henry. That's it. And it's not because I said, hey, I have to add ownership in here. That's part of it, right? But it's I'm one that likes, we talked about this so many times, diversifying your portfolio, making sure you have exposure to everybody, right? But at the same time, I refuse to draft him in the first half of round 1, where he's going. He's going at pick 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? Consistently in that range. The 3 shares I own are at between picks 1.11 and 112. So 11 or 12 hole is where I have taken him. If I'm in the 12 hole, and I've done this once, I deliberately did not take him in the first round so I could say I drafted Derrick Henry in the second round, right? But
I do that sometimes too.
Got a round of value. But it's, that's where I'm comfortable drafting him, is at 1-2 turn. And you don't see him go there often, but the reason why I like taking him there is because you can create unique rosters. You can create, a team that is not going to be easy to replicate in these drafts. So you can start off with like a Henry Mixon at times, or you can start off with a Henry and Cook build. There's a lot of different variations that you can start off with at that tail end if he is able to fall to you at that point. So to answer Scott's question here, I'm comfortable taking him in that 10, 11, 12 hole, but only because you're going to be able to create unique rosters, and because at that point he slipped below ADP and it presents himself as a value. Even though I have other players ranked ahead of him that I know are going to come back to me in the second round, that I can pair the two together. And it's, you take a loss at one and a win at the other position that balances out. But again, it's a unique roster construction. Couple more questions with Henry. Cook, Fournette, Kamara, I'm assuming he's saying, do you have him ranked ahead of him? I have Cook ranked ahead of Henry, not Fournette, not Kamara. How about you, Jody?
Let's pull up the rankings here. Cook, I would prefer to take I'd rather take the gamble on the upside there with Cook, but I have him pretty similar ranked to Leonard Fournette. But again, we just talked about targets. You feel like Leonard Fournette, and we know he's going to be a safer bet in that area of the game. So really, that comes down to a coin flipper. It comes down to your risk reward. Your ability to you swinging for the fences here? I mean, it feels like Fournette is probably a little bit safer in PPR scoring. You know, we're talking generally about FFWC, which is what that is. So, you know, right there, I'm in multiple leagues, and most people are, you know, in a bunch of drafts. I you know, and that given the choice between those two, I'd rather it be something like a 50-50 thing where I'm gonna take a little bit of Fournette, I'm gonna take some Henry and whatnot. I mean, let's face it. I mean, we've seen Henry. He's definitely got top 3, top 4 upside if he stays healthy on that team. And if that role where he had as a pass catcher last year, it does carry over. I'm not 100% confident it will, but let's just say it does. He's you know, he offers top 3, top 4 upside, but again, the wear and tear, the fact that he's 28. Does he turn 29 during the season?
No, it'll be like January, I think is what it is. So, there's if you start to look at the history of running backs and usage, in particular guys that have touched the ball so many times during their prime like this, there's some red flags. We have one more question, then we'll move on to your next fade. This one's from Scott. He's Lawrence, different Scott. In general, do you draft for safety in round 1 in the World Championship draft at FFWC? Oh, tough question here. So if I'm only doing one team, I wouldn't say that I'm drafting safety, but I'm going to be, I guess floor and safety would be comparable words, but I am going to be being a little bit more conservative is the word I would use. I'm not going to be swinging for the fence necessarily with, you know, somebody like last year I was drafting a lot of Eckler, right, in round 1. I was taking him 3rd overall, 4th overall. People thought I was crazy, right? But I'm not doing that if I'm doing one draft in the World Championship. I'm more conservative, and I'm going to probably push Eckler down and say, hey, maybe he'll slip to me in round 2. So, yes, I'm a little bit more conservative if I'm only doing one team, but based on the volume I do, I can get a little bit more creative in how I draft. So if you're only doing one, I'd say draft a little bit more conservatively. Go out and get your guys. If Henry's your guy, then ignore everything I'm saying. Go out and get Henry because he's your guy. If you're going to go out and play one team in one draft and put all your marbles into it, go out and at least get your guys, because then that way you win or you lose. Hey, you know what? I got my guy. I'm happy with it, right?
You can win a league. It's pretty easy to win a league when you miss on your 5th round pick or your 9th round pick or whatnot. It's hard, in particular when you have fewer teams. It's hard when you blow your 1st round pick or when your guy tears his ACL in the 3rd preseason game and all that. It becomes much more difficult to win a game. That's why if you're throwing a lot of eggs in a basket, diversity very important. But if you can't afford to take a lot of chances, you're only in a few leagues or whatnot, then I agree with you that you're the first several rounds of a draft, you're more conservative. You sit back and you let value fall into your lap, and you don't take a lot of unnecessary chances.
It's like a tight poker player, right? You sit there and wait for your opportunity and attack.
Your point, that's a good analogy. Your point is to grind your way onto a seat in the final table, and then you can unleash the craziness and start coming out with your bluffs and check raises and all that kind of stuff.
Yep. And that's how I built my high stakes bankroll. I was a very conservative drafter in the beginning because I was only playing 3 teams. And once you are able to build that role, you can start getting creative. Well, let's move on. Last fade, Jody. Hit me with your last fade at a running back position.
Okay, first I just want to say I forgot to mention this at the top. I want to say kudos to a lot of the people that are putting their rankings into Fantasy Pros and all you high stakes FFWC drafters, because Billy and I mentioned this when we looked at projections last week. The rankings are pretty tight. They're pretty good. I mean, we were having a lot of issues debating we got to be a little different. How can we move and all this? But like I said, for the most part, I think the rankings are pretty good. So I had a little difficulty finding, really extreme fades and guys that I thought, like, you dug really deep to get your sleepers, which was awesome. I didn't necessarily go that far because, like I thought the rankings were actually pretty good.
But it's good though. You give them a top end sleeper, I should say.
Well, that's what I like about our dynamic is you're looking at things from completely focused on high stakes FFWC, and I'm more of a traditional. I've been doing this for more than 30 years. I'm more of your generally year-to-year PPR redraft type guy. And of course, I'm a dynasty, huge dynasty guy too. But I like that we can look at things through different dynamics. And when you and I can get those two opposing sometimes dynamics and put them together, then that's a good recipe for success, in my opinion. But so as I was perusing the rankings and all that, it was just that the same area as Cam Akers, and in this case, Antonio Gibson. So he is being drafted, 3 places behind Cam at FFWC. He's 31, so he's the next running back off the board, RB 15. I have some real concerns about Antonio Gibson, and I'm going to get into that here. The main thing being that they kind of didn't re-sign J.D. McKissick, and then they did re-sign J.D. McKissick. And that was troubling for Gibson because a lot of what was promising about him was how he developed in the second half of the season as a pass catcher. But J.D. McKissick was Pro Football Focus's number 14 graded receiving back last year. He's an ace in that area. He averaged 4.8 targets per game. And what was interesting is, as we know, McKissick got hurt down the stretch. He was hurt, I believe, in week 12, so he missed the final 4 or 5 games. And what's interesting at Gibson, like I said, he took on more of a pass-catching role down the stretch last year, but 44% of Antonio Gibson's targets last year came after McKissick was gone from weeks 12 through 17. That's pretty significant because before, when J.D. McKissick was on the field, Antonio Gibson was only averaging 2.3 targets per game. That's pretty rough. Now, when we're talking about a guy who's going, in round 2 or at the very top part of round 3, you're taking him. Maybe if you started wide receiver, you're taking him as your RB1. That's a little risky. He's not taking on a huge role in the receiving game. And to be honest with you, a recurring point as we're talking running backs today has been red zone usage and whatnot. And what you like about Gibson is he got a lot of red zone touches. The problem is he was not very effective. He ranked 3rd with 47 red zone rushing attempts, but he was tied for 101st with a 1.7 yard per carry average. No, that stat can be skewed because if you're punching in a bunch of 1 yard touchdowns, you're not going to have a lot of yards per carry. But he wasn't necessarily very effective in that area. He ranked 3rd in the NFL with 17 carries inside the 5-yard line. But he was the only running back with more than a dozen red zone carries that had 6 or fewer red zone touchdowns. Red zone touchdowns from inside the 5-yard line. Now, in addition to J.D. McKissick returning to take on more of the receiving game and taking those opportunities away from Gibson, you have Brian Robinson. This guy was a beast at Alabama. He scored 16 touchdowns. He's extremely effective in short yardage. He's the kind of guy that can punch in those touchdowns. He's 6'1", 225. With Gibson's slight ineffectiveness in that area, it feels like Brian Robinson's the kind of guy that they're going to be like, hey, let's look, a lot of times it feels like their coach is stuck back and recreating that dynamic that he had with D'Angelo Williams and Jonathan Stewart, where he wants to create this 1-2 punch that was effective a decade ago for the Panthers. Well, this feels like Brian Robinson might be coming in to do that Jonathan Stewart role. And if that's the case, well, if Gibson's losing targets to McKissick and he's potentially losing short yardage work, then it becomes, kind of problematic. And Ron Rivera actually said this week that he envisions this 1-2 punch. And that another report came out, I think today on Roto World, that said that Gibson, they expect to have the same amount of touches, but his week-to-week usage could be inconsistent. That's problematic if you're investing a late second or early third round fantasy pick on a running back. If he's not going to necessarily get the start again. 2.3 targets per game before J.D. McKissick was absent. It's tough. And again, if you're Brandon Carson Wentz, who at the same time, he doesn't necessarily target running backs all that much. So the opportunities for Gibson to be effective as a receiver feels like it's going to take a pretty dramatic hit. And if he's missing out on those short yardage works thanks to Robinson, then I see it pretty difficult for him to deliver on his current ADP. He's not a guy that I would completely fade. Again, this becomes relative. If he slips to the bottom of round 3 or somehow he's still on the board at RB 18 or RB 19, you start thinking about it. But at his current rate, I won't be committing too many. I won't be rostering him too much.
So he's already begun falling. Like the round 2-3 days are long gone in high stakes, at least. He has been going between that running back 19 to 22 range as of late. Kev says on DK, he's going in the 5th now. I know at FFWC, he's going in the 5th. In the Superflex, he's going in the 6th or 7th round at times. But he is already starting to slip. So for you as a drafter, at what point are you comfortable taking Gibson? Is that the right ADP for you, that running back 18 to 20 range?
It's more appealing. Every time so it's so funny. So I never enter a draft with any set strategy, but I really want to get on board with this #0RB strategy one of these days. It just never plays out because I'm like, I see how quickly, running back dries up and all that. But, Gibson to me, like I said, if he's around what you just said, if he's around that RB20, and this is news to me, if he's slipping that low, then, maybe he's not a guy I'm going to fade every draft, clearly. And of course, if you're in a bunch of drafts, it's never a good idea to completely target a guy every time or to completely fade a guy every time. You got to get different stocks and take your chances here and there. But
all right, let's do a this or that. Breece Hall or Gibson?
Wow, man. So it feels like Breece Hall's another guy that the consensus seems a little higher to me on. It's because we talked about their quarterback, and I've got real reservations about that whole offense in general because of their quarterback. So I think I'd rather take Gibson, to be honest with you. I mean, Breece Hall probably is the more of the home run swing. He's got like the unknown factor. Like he may come in and be this 3-down superstar, and he's got the potential to. We love him. I mean, we did the profiles on him, but also factor in Michael Carter was no slouch last year either. But
okay, how about ETN or Gibson?
Man, I really liked Etienne, but I still probably would lean. I'd want to go 50-50 on that. I want some parts of Etienne because he's a guy that I really, really had high hopes for last year. And a lot of that had to do with Trevor Lawrence. And we all kind of bought into, man, Jacksonville could be interesting. And that turned out to be such a disastrous train wreck. And now, people don't want nothing to do with the Jags, which,
Okay, we'll do 2 more. Cam Akers or Gibson?
I think I'd rather take a shot on Cam, to be honest with you. I think their ADPs are right, that Cam is, like I mentioned at the top, but when I started talking about Gibson, he's right there ahead of him.
Yep.
That feels about right.
Okay, Dobbins, last one. Dobbins or Gibson?
Man, I don't know, man. See, I don't know how many targets are Baltimore are they going to throw to their running backs because they just really don't include them much as pass catchers. That's a concern to me.
Putting you on the spot here.
Yeah, but I probably would take Gibson over Dobbins too, because I have Dobbins pretty comfortably down into like the mid-20s range because I don't believe I'm as high on him as other people are, and a lot of it has to do with, again, it's just they're not incorporated. Baltimore doesn't incorporate.
I'm on the opposite of the fence. Every one of those players I mentioned I would take ahead of Gibson in drafts, and a lot of it is either shootout related with like their schedule in weeks 15, 16, or 17, or it just breaks down to usage. And I think
I'm glad to hear you say that because Gibson remains one of these big hashtag Twitter guys where people just have gone all in with him, and they're just sticking to it. And he's not a guy that I don't know that I've ever been able to roster him because he always goes before I, value him. And now it feels like, I believe he was top 10 last year. I want to say he was RB8 in PPR scoring. And I feel like, no, I mean, he definitely peaked. He's not a guy that I'm anywhere near that range on, as we've talked about. And it feels like it's going to be another season where I'm not going to have him, hardly anywhere.
All right, my last fade, and then after I do this last fade, we're going to give away this card. Josh Jacobs again is my last fade, and he's in the article. And I said in the article, I'm going to say it again here. Why should I want Josh Jacobs when the Raiders don't want Josh Jacobs? They declined his 5th-year option. I mean, they drafted Zamir White, who is my running back 3 in this draft class, just talent-wise, right? They drafted him with pick 4.17 in the NFL draft. They also went out and signed Amir Abdullah, Brandon Bolden, and I know those aren't the most exciting names in the NFL, but you look at their quarterback, or they're not the quarterback. You look at their coach, their new coach, Josh McDaniels, and where did he just come from, Jody?
I want to say sounds like maybe the Patriots.
Yep, that's right, the Patriots. And I don't know about you, but
team that has a long history of committees and inconsistent running back usage.
Oh, yeah. It's been like a 10-year nightmare for me in fantasy sports, right? I'm not the one that drafted or even picked up LeGarrette Blount the year he had like 30-something touchdowns or whatever. It was some godly number that you would never expect. It was like 19 touchdowns or something. But again,
Jonas Gray hashtag.
Yeah, you look back and it's just these situations that McDaniels has put these running back by committees through, and from a fantasy perspective, it's a nightmare. And I look at this and say they declined his 5th-year option. They brought in all these, below mediocre talents, but it still to me signifies, or it's at least portraying that they are going to be utilizing a committee approach, or at least rotating backs through, and we aren't going to see the usage that Josh Jacobs has seen in the past to really prop up his numbers in fantasy, because he is a volume dependent back. He's not explosive, he's not electric, right? He has to have volume in order to succeed, and if you take away that volume, I have a lot of concerns with Josh Jacobs here. He has started slipping in drafts, actually. So when I wrote this, he was, running back 23 in early FFWC drafts, and this was researched through like the middle of May and into, maybe a week ago. But as of the last week, he's even slipped more. So we're starting to see him go running back 25, running back 26 in this week's Superflex Bowl draft over at FFWC. That's about the area. I'm still think that's too early, but when you start seeing running back 26, 27, 28, I'd still draft Miles Sanders, who went running back 27 this draft ahead of Josh Jacobs. I'd still draft Devin Singletary, who you listed as one of your targets, or you should say, who you were higher on the consensus here, who I would take ahead of Josh Jacobs. Rashad Penny, that's about the area where I start saying, okay, I'll draft myself some Jacobs, even though I think Penny has more talent. That's about the area where I start saying, hey, I will consider Josh Jacobs. And in order for him to get there, he has to drop another 1.5 to 2 rounds. And I'm just not sure it's going to happen, at least in the immediate future in early drafts.
Let me just say this to the people about how smart Billy is. You're talking about, this is a guy that knows a lot more than I do when it comes to high stakes, how to diversify a roster, how to take your shots and all that. And I will say this, as when Billy and I first sat down at our rating summit, our projection summit a couple weeks ago, I was much higher on Josh Jacobs. Billy and I had to have a couple of phone conversations for him to talk me off of the ledge. And he
True story.
did after a while, because I was looking in at the targets. I'm like, he got 54 passes. He had like 60 something targets. Billy mentioned the Amir Abdullah, that he mentioned Zamir White, kind of talked me off the ledge a little bit. And the fact that, they weren't willing to commit that. And that might be the 5th-year contract. That might be a smart business decision by them overall. But Billy did talk me down. So I was able to come down on Jacobs. Now, I will say I'm not as low on Jacobs, as Billy is. I wouldn't necessarily take him. But
get him out of here.
I will say that I'm willing to sit back at a person that I have an extreme amount of respect for, which is you, Billy, who looks at things from a whole different perspective and is able to bring things to my eyes that I don't necessarily see on first glance. So I appreciated that. And like I said, I'm just telling people, if Billy is this hesitant to touch Josh Jacobs, listen to him.
Well, I appreciate that, Jody. Josh Jacobs, I said, there's a time and place, right? There's always a time you can draft someone, and just know that as a drafter. Where are you comfortable taking him? Where are you comfortable taking a loss, taking the value? Know that as a drafter, set hard limits, set soft limits for yourself, and just stick to those, because that's when you're going to get a little bit of edge in draft room. All right, the time has come. We're going to be giving away the Javonte Williams card. I love how it covers our faces. They're like, get him out of here. The question you've all been waiting for, so then you can hang up on us and get out of here. It is, what is the last date for May Madness at the FFWC? This date is set in place for the deepest discounts of the year. Type it in the chat. First one to type it in the chat is the winner of the Javonte Williams card. What is the last date that you are eligible for May Madness at the FFWC for discounted teams? And we already have an answer there. Boom.
August 1st.
That was first. So fast. May 31st. Oh, Jose, you missed it by about 10 seconds. 1912 Fantasies, the winner, the Javonte card, May 31st is the date of the FFWC end of May Madness, which again is the deepest discounts. They're all coming in now. Everyone's they were a little slower. You were a full minute behind, Always Smooth. Jose was about 10 seconds behind. Scott's laughing because he knows they were too far behind. But again, deepest discounts of the year. All you got to do is reserve your spots.
I got a Jamarcus Russell jersey card if anyone wants that as a consolation prize.
Oh, I think Jose was the consolation. Let's see. We got
Jamarcus Russell.
Okay.
SP rookie trading. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yep. Jose was second. So, Jose, you got the consolation prize. It's not Jamarcus. He's like, no, I don't want that card. Get it out of here.
It's not even worth the cost it would take to ship it.
Shipping's gone up these days, haven't you know? It's like 3 cents more. No, it's just all right. Well, that's it for tonight, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Real quick before you leave, though, I'm trying to fill the draft for Friday. So if we were able to fill the draft, we're going to be doing a Reflex Bowl live. I think there's 9 more entrants needed by tomorrow. So if you're here and you want to draft tomorrow, it's going to be at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 o'clock Pacific time. I'm not going to go through all the time zones. You can figure out the math. But 9 p.m. Eastern, we're trying to fill the Super Flex Bowl. I will draft it and stream live if we're able to fill it. If not, oh, wait, I missed a question. But if not, we will come back next week with Jody and I. I missed one question from earlier I wanted to come back to. Top rookie running back target after Hall, of course. What's your answer there, Jody?
Top rookie running back target? I don't know. It's escaping me right now. I mean, I want to say James Cook, but at the same time, I'm trying to sell, Devin Singletary as a guy. So,
I got mine. I'm gonna say it. Mine's gonna be Rachaad White. And he was my running back 4 in this draft class. I had Zamir White ranked ahead of him, but landing spot, I think that his pass catching ability inside of this Buccaneers offense with a lot of vacated targets available, or at least until Godwin is back, I think that he's going to have a pretty significant role here for Tom Brady, given that he can pass block and catch the ball.
Yeah, I'm looking at projections, and it looks like on my personal projections that Cook actually comes up in PPR scoring, but Kenneth Walker's right behind him. And
so you're going to say Walker?
Well, I mean, he's right behind Cook. It just depends on your risk. If you're a Rashad Penny guy, well, then you don't really want Walker. But if you don't believe Penny's got it, and if you're buying into this whole thing about Kenneth Walker's usage as a receiver, then you could argue that he definitely would be up there. I think a real sleeper in this rookie class is Isaiah Spiller, because Austin Eckler, I mean, if he goes down, I'm projecting that Spiller is going to easily be their RB2. So you're talking about a guy, if Eckler were to get hurt, and it wouldn't be the first time, Spiller's got RB2 weekly potential right away as their starting back. So he's a guy that, like, where he is currently being drafted and all that, I've been trying to scoop up Spiller as much as I can.
Not a bad call. Kev's getting smart over here and says it ends at midnight Pacific. Technically, it's June 1st on the East Coast. Okay, Kev. And Trevor's in the mountains right now. He just put in May 31st, like 5 minutes later. So little behind there. Yep, he says I'm behind on the stream. Way behind on the stream, Trevor. But that's it, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you all back here next week. If you're able to, hop in the live draft Friday, tomorrow, 9 p.m. Eastern, Superflex Bowl number 5, I think it is, or that might just be my team name. Oh, it's Superflex Bowl 4 is the name of the league. 9 p.m. Eastern draft. Need 9 spots. See you all then. Take care and have a good night.